Okay, we're getting started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. If you'd like to put in the chat where you are dialing in from, if people dial in anymore, and what's the name of your business. If you're a vendor for, give a little bit of background around your business so we can see who's here and where everybody's coming from. I'm Jill Cruz. I'm outside of New York. Outside of New York City, New York State. Jillian, you're in Boston?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Jillian Evans, the Center for OBC, and I am calling you in from just outside of Boston.
Boston, yeah. So just wait another minute and we have several people still coming on and we'll get started. We'd love to see where you're from, what your business is. Please let us know so we can get an idea. Are you already contracting in K-12 or why you joined today? Just to get a little background about who's here. It says it looks like chat is disabled. He's gonna chat with everyone. Let's see. Thank you for letting me know. Can you see? Try to chat now. Yay. Okay. Hello, everybody. Now it feels like we actually have people. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to get started. My name is Jill Cruz, and I am the Chief Operations Officer for RFP SchoolWatch, and we are here today with Jillian Evans from the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting. And I see people are dialing in from Tennessee, Chicago, Minneapolis, Maryland, Lake Tahoe, Florida, from across the country, Plus Learning, so Chattanooga. It's going so fast, so I can't even read what everybody does, but Mid-Hudson Valley, Chicago, just started submitting RFPs for K-12 college and universities. Great, awesome. So I'm sure we have people with a variety of backgrounds and levels of comfort with K-12 and public procurement. So we're going to have a lot of information today. So please feel free to put questions in the Q&A or in the chat. Southern California, Civic Empowerment Group of Sacramento. Hello from Atlanta, Speech Therapy Contractor for Schools. Awesome. So today we are talking about RFP SchoolWatch has partnered with the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting to bring more information to you about outcomes-based contracting. So I'm going to do a little introduction about RFP SchoolWatch and why we're partnering today with the OBC, and then Jillian will take over. So again, my name is Jill Cruz. I am the COO of RFP SchoolWatch, and Jillian Evans works for the Center for Outcome-Based Contracting, and she leads marketplace strategy, where she helps school systems design partnerships that elevate student voice and improve outcomes. Her path has taken her from high school math classrooms in New Orleans to leadership roles in ed tech and district partnerships at Pearson and Panorama Education. Jillian holds a master's from Columbia University's Teacher College and a bachelor's from Trinity College. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about how we started talking with Jillian at RFP SchoolWatch and why we decided to do this webinar. So RFP SchoolWatch has long believed that public procurement must move beyond compliance and toward impact. The Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting reflects this shift with uncommon clarity. Their work offers a research-driven framework that elevates the purpose of procurement from purchasing to improving student outcomes through evidence, accountability, and strategic partnership. And what RFP SchoolWatch, what our mission is part of our mission to help our customers and anybody who's in our, follows us, is to make that shift from being reactive about contracting to being proactive. And we feel like this is aligned with that mission. And so we have these are just a few of the many reasons that we wanted to collaborate and bring the OBC onto this webinar for all of you. The OBC advances the future of K-12 procurement through research-driven, outcomes-aligned contracting models, centers mutual accountability, because that's a big thing that I think a lot of people wonder about, strengthening district and vendor partnerships, and improving implementation conditions. The OBC represents a leading 2026 procurement trend that will shape how states and districts design, evaluate, and manage contracts for years to come. And it creates a foundation for sustainable improvement, transparency, and long-term value across the entire procurement ecosystem. So we believe this is the way of the future, and we are very excited to have Jillian today. Jillian, take over.
Thank you, Jill, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm looking through the chat and seeing all of the beautiful places that you are dialing in from today. And let me just tell you, we had our first snowfall here in Boston. And I'm already quite jealous. Brenda, I see you say you're calling in from southern sunny California, and I'm already jealous of you. So thank you so much for taking time to learn more about outcomes-based contracting. And thank you, Jill and the RFP SchoolWatch team for inviting me into your space today. As Jill shared, I represent the Center from outcomes-based contracting. And what we do at the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting is we provide technical assistance to both districts and providers. We also produce quite a bit of research and insights about how outcomes-based contracting is pushing forward student learning in districts. We have quite a bit of open source resources, so I do hope you'll check out our website and see where there's resources that can support you, from RFP templates to different guidelines. And then we also run large scale cohort learnings for state DOEs in districts as well as providers. And I'll share more about that with you at the end in case that's something you want to join us with. And so at the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting, we have a strong goal, and it's clear what we want to do is that by 2030, we will have 1 million students that will receive instructional services under an OBC, and those will produce 2 million student outcomes. So our time together for our objectives are we are going to define what outcomes-based contracting is. Some of you, it might be the first time you're hearing about OBC. Others, I see some of the providers here with us. I know that you guys are already doing OBC, so thank you for joining and learning more. We're going to share more about the pricing model and how the rate card concept works. That's a big question everyone always wants to know, is how does pricing with an outcomes-based contract work? We will talk about that today. We'll show you how OBCs can support your organization and go-to-market strategy. And then I'll also share next steps on how you can partner with a district through an OBC and get some additional support. Please feel free to use the chat at any time with questions. Happy to pause, answer questions on the fly, and we will also be sure that we leave time at the very end for questions. So the first big question, though, that you all might have, you don't need to put this one in the chat, is what is outcomes-based contracting? And so first, just want to say that outcomes-based contracting empowers partnerships to contract for clear student outcomes and compels mutual accountability for achieving them. So as Jill shared, I have a background in EdTech sales, both at Pearson and Panorama Education. And when I learned about OBCs and how they create strong, sticky partnerships across the district, I was immediately hooked. Because for me, an outcomes-based contract was more than just the contract itself, but how it turned into the blueprint for implementation post-sale, and how everyone on both sides of the equation were aligned on what needs to be done to get students to achieve meaningful outcomes. And so once I learned more about the different components of an OBC, I was hooked, and here I am today. So part of an OBC is there's clear program outcomes within the contract. There's clear responsibilities of what the district is responsible for having a high fidelity implementation and what the provider is responsible for. It shows a clear return on investment So you can imagine boards of education at districts love OBCs. When it's time for them to approve districts or renew a contract, they love seeing an OBC because it's such a clear way to show the return on investment. And then there's also clear progress and data sharing mechanisms that happen within an OBC program that can sometimes be more difficult to navigate when not under an OBC. And I'll share more of that in just a second because I know that sometimes data sharing and tracking student progress along the way, it's so important, but sometimes that can be a challenge. So we'll share how we help alleviate those challenges. And as Jill shared, the goals of OBC are to improve procurement practices, make sure that the reason why we're bringing this program in is clearly defined at the beginning. It's to strengthen implementation. I'll share more concrete examples of how we strengthen implementation in just a moment. And then to also, and the most important, is to achieve meaningful student outcomes. So many of you might be saying right now, I do a lot of that in my traditional contracts, and you're not wrong. We are doing a lot of it already, but sometimes it's just about codifying it into the contract so that everyone is held accountable. Whereas sometimes in a traditional partnership or non-OBC, it might not live within the contract. Maybe the scope of work or the mutual accountability is in a document that's in Google Drive that once the new superintendent left, we no longer have, it's no longer reviewed and not everyone has access to it. So having all of these components clear in the OBC is just so helpful. And it's a lot of it, it's not things that are new, it's not things that are not already happening. It's just about codifying it into the OBC. So in a traditional partnership, a contract is paid in full when services begin or on a set schedule. In an outcomes-based contract, there's a base payment or a guarantee payment that's anywhere from 50 to 60%. And then the remainder of the contract is contingent and paid out when student outcomes are met. In a traditional partnership, there's roles and responsibilities around who's doing what. It's not always very clear. In an outcomes-based contract, there's a whole section within the contract about who specifically is responsible for what and on what timeline and how we're all held accountable for that. And in a traditional partnership, stakeholders often work independently to identify ways to improve implementation, where in an outcomes-based contract, through and continuous improvement structures, both districts and providers are working together to meet on a normal cadence to look at data and ask each other, how can we improve this partnership, creating a truly beautiful unification of district and provider. So I promised I would share a little bit about how OBCs help support with implementation. Um, has anyone on this call read Lawrence Holt's 5% problem? It was something that came out a few years ago, an article about how oftentimes EdTech licenses are used with about 5% of fidelity, right? And so what we see under an OBC in Hillsborough County, Duval County, Uplift Education, three incredibly large systems where change management requires a lot of thoughtful planning. Nearly 75% of students achieved recommended dosage in Hillsborough County. So thinking about that 75% compared to that national average of 5% is incredible. In Duval County, even better, right? Under traditional contracts, ed tech licenses are often used 5%. But in Duval County, under an OBC, 95% of students achieved the recommended dosage, which is incredible. And in Uplift Education, they paid out 100% of their contingent dollars, and nearly 55% of students achieved that recommended dosage. So again, you can just see the results speak for themselves of how OBCs require everyone across the partnership from schools, classroom teachers, district leaders, providers to come together and ensure that the product is being used with fidelity and how it should be. All right, where are OBCs happening? So I'm going to take us through a quick history of the Center for OBC and where we're seeing outcomes-based contracts pop up. I will say though, I get in my email all the time about OBCs that are happening outside of the Center for OBC, which is terrific, and we hope that that's what you guys will do. So this is not a comprehensive list. This just shows where it's happening with the Center for OBC. So to start us off, um, we are working with large districts in Florida, Duval County, Hillsborough County, Orange County, some of the top 10 largest districts in not only Florida, but the country, as well as Colorado. We have Denver Public Schools. We're working with Atlanta Public Schools, large districts in California like Fresno and Santa Ana, Milpitas, as well as many across Texas. I will also share that we are now beginning to work with state DOEs. More and more states are coming to us and saying, we want to set policy and accountability for our districts. And one of the best ways for us to do that is to support outcomes-based contracting across the districts in our state. So we're now actually supporting state cohorts where we partner with a state DOE. For example, we're doing that in Arkansas, California, Texas, and Florida, as well as Indiana. We work with the state DOE, we work with a local intermediary who can support with capacity building to the state, as well as up to 8 districts to help model what a strong implementation of an OBC design and then ongoing continuous learning looks like. So we're seeing such amazing expansion of OBC. We started with high dosage tutoring. We then moved into EdTech supplemental instruction. And we're also working with professional learning providers and programs as well.
Julian, there is a
Yeah.
question. If the OBC model is applied to K-12 contracts other than student learning, such as transportation contracts.
Thank you so much. And Tara, that's a terrific question. So, as I named before, we have done deep feasibility research around OBC as a model in high dosage tutoring, ed tech supplemental instructions, and professional learning. So, all of those are academic student learning focused programs. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean that principles of OBC can't be applied to things like transportation or other things. However, that's not what's supported through us at the Center for OBC. We really keep it to student learning and student-facing programs. Great question, Tara. I appreciate you. All right. So again, just want to share the 5 states that we're currently working with. This is only expanding, and we keep adding and hearing from new states as we continue to see OBC making its way into more and more policy at the state level. In addition to state level policy, we're seeing it pop up at the US DOE and in federal policy. So there's a proposed priority around meaningful learning opportunities that emphasizes evidence-based, outcome-driven programs and actually recommends outcomes-based contracting as a lever for improving student achievement. So again, I share all of this to show that we started with districts. We're now seeing more momentum and excitement at the state level, and now it's beginning to pop up at the federal level. We even had a superintendent who is a big supporter of outcomes-based contracting and utilized this model in his district when he was a superintendent in Texas. He was on the House floor back in September talking to the House about outcomes-based contracting and how it was so supportive of his district initiatives. All right. So as I named before, we're seeing state demand that they're increasingly implementing policy to promote providers with clear, robust, and meaningful evidence. And OBC helps meet that demand by it provides a strong pathway for states, for districts to be able to showcase how the evidence, how this program is supporting student outcomes and getting real-time evidence as a result of that. And the way that happens is through a defined student population and very strong implementation. And so lastly, why now? The reality for states and districts is there's ongoing budget uncertainty. Every dollar is under scrutiny, and sometimes they can't afford programs without outcomes, and they're demanding proof of student learning gains. That's the state and district reality. The provider reality is it's very competitive out there. You obviously all know that, or else you wouldn't be here, right? It's competitive out there, and competitive advantage goes beyond price and features. You want to differentiate through proven results, and there's alignment of mission with market demands. And it's critical to build a foundation for growth and trust. And so the shared opportunity together of how OBC brings these two realities and creates an opportunity for the entire partnership is states can demonstrate budget accountability, providers can differentiate through proven results and not just features, and you're creating a partnership where financial success aligns with student success. I'm going to pause for just a second because I think we have some questions. Vanessa asked, what if existing barriers within a child's personal life create barriers to program and then result in vendor non-payment? Yes, that's a great question, Vanessa. I'm going to talk more about that. So high level, just to answer the question, then we'll get more in depth in just a moment. There are factors that written into the contract that if a student doesn't use the program or doesn't attend the tutoring or doesn't access the intervention to a certain number of hours or days, whatever your research shows is critical, then you as a provider actually get paid out for that student. So that's a very common misconception that we hear is that, well, if a student doesn't use um, doesn't show up for tutoring or doesn't use the tool, then we just don't get paid. It's actually the opposite because we're writing into the contract that it's a district and school requirement to support that student using the tool and showing up to the intervention. And if they don't, then you actually, the provider, get paid for that student's outcomes. There's another question from Navarro. What happens when a district wants an OBC but doesn't have the resources to support that? That's a great question. You know, monitoring all the data, making sure it's a very strong implementation can take some extra legwork on the district side. So it does require some resources in that sense. How do we address that concern is, you know, we share with them the alternative is what the return on that investment, right, is that they're going to get tangible student outcomes that they can then report to. And so what we've done with a lot of districts, we've shared that with them, is we look at all of the things and all of the different programs, and we actually say which are ones that you want to highlight and invest your full time, and which are the ones that feel redundant, right, and help them with like a more holistic strategy. And one more question from Susan, and then I'll keep us moving forward, but please keep the questions coming in. These are terrific. How long is a typical time frame between the vendor providing the product and measurable outcomes resulting in vendor payment? That's another great question, Susan. I appreciate you. So we recommend both middle of year and end of year payment outcomes. So typically that base payment, that 60% is paid at the beginning, and then we recommend a middle of year outcome assessment. And then the vendor gets paid for all outcomes that are met, and then also end of year outcome assessments. And then vendor gets paid for all outcomes that are met, both at the end of year. The reason why we recommend both middle of year and end of year is one, it keeps implementation accountable to being strong from day one because there's a midpoint progress check. And two, it allows you as the provider to recognize revenue and not have to wait until the end for the remainder of the contract. All right, please keep these questions coming. Really appreciate you, and we will keep us moving forward. So the ingredients of a successful OBC, a lot of us typically think about OBC and we only think about the contingent outcome payments. When in reality, there's so many more other parts of an OBC that are critical for it being successful. Those are making sure it's a clearly defined population, having a mutual accountability structure. So as we talked about before, Vanessa, right, like making sure that it's clear what are the district actions to make sure that implementation's going well, what are the provider actions to make sure that implementation's going well, and then also a continuous improvement structure. So those strong partnership moments where we're coming together and ensuring that we're tracking progress along the way, and fixing anything with the partnership that is off. So this is always the part of the conversation that, most people perk up in their chair because, you want to learn a little bit more about, well, how does this actually work from a payment thing? And listen, I completely get it. But what we always say is there's an increase in risk, an increase in payout. So what you're looking at here on the screen is on the left hand bar, there's a traditional price for delivery. It's just one price. This is the cost for the program. The middle bar represents how an OBC typically works. So you'll have a base price, then you'll have a budget assigned to outcome one, another budget assigned to outcome two, and then in this case, let's say there's three outcomes, so there's another budget assigned to outcome three. And as you can see, is if all the students meet all of their outcomes, there's an opportunity as a provider to actually see larger amounts of revenue from this program than you would if under a traditional contract. We actually see that if all students meet their learning outcomes, meet the payment outcomes, there is the possibility of making 10 to 20% more on this program when compared to a traditional program. Now, we know that it's not every day that every single student meets every single outcome. Wouldn't that be an amazing world for us to live in, right? So what you're looking at here on the right-hand column, that is a more actual or traditional payout based off more realistic factors. And even so, our data shows that it's still typically a higher payment outcome, total revenue, than a traditional price per under a traditional contract. So lots of questions there, I'm sure. So I'm going to keep going and talk more about this concept. Traditional contract and pricing versus OBC contract and pricing. Under a traditional contract, you typically see line items for the various inputs, maybe for student licenses, maybe an input for 3 fall teacher workshops and ongoing coaching, and then you have your total price. With an OBC, we're shifting that narrative. So it's no longer about the inputs, but it's about the outcomes. So in an outcomes-based contract and in the pricing, you don't see the inputs. You only see the outcomes. What is it that we actually hope to get out of this program? And so here you'll see an outcome for high level growth. You'll see an outcome for phonics proficiency. And then you also see this base payment. And so one other thing that I will name is in an outcomes-based contract, we do things at a price per student. So it's an all-in price per student. So we ask providers and districts before they get to the contracting stage to say, this is our student group. These are the outcomes we want to achieve. And then the provider, based off their research and their expertise on the intervention, will go through and say, okay, this is all of the things that will need to happen to help get them from A to B. Add that all up, and then you divide that as a price per student. So you're not beholden to all those inputs. You might have to do more, you might have to do less. It just depends on progress monitoring and how the data is going. But you're doing it as a price per student. And if you remember on the slide before, I said that you can make about 10 to 20% higher on an OBC versus a traditional contract. And that's what you'll see. Here under a traditional contract, it's $28 per student. Here under an OBC, with the OBC pricing, it's $33 per student. Lastly, there is an outcome payment cap. And so this is to protect districts for blowing out of their budget. All right. I'm going to move us forward to mutual accountability, but I recognize that I'm from Boston. I talk fast. That was a lot of information. So I'm just going to pause. If you have any questions, please feel free um, to put them in the chat. Lisa, it's an article called The 5% Problem by Lawrence Holt. But if you have any questions about pricing, feel free to put in the chat, or you can also save it to the very end. Happy to answer more then. All right. Let's talk about mutual accountability. All right, I'm going to answer this question, David, before we talk about mutual accountability. So, David, really appreciate this question. He says there would be cost associated with OBC, monitoring fidelity, demonstrating outcomes. Do these responsibilities and expenses get worked into these contracts? Yes, yes. So, as I just shared, you can make about 10 to 20% more with a OBC contract. And the reason for that extra cushion is to one, incentivize providers to want to do this, account for your time in those actions that you just shared. And then lastly, um, to leave room for innovation, right? Like if all of a sudden students are just really off track and not meeting the outcomes, what additional interventions need to happen? Manan, I'm going to answer your question and then I'll move on to mutual accountability. What is the role of SCF, Southern Education Foundation, which is where the center is hosted, in connecting vendors to opportunities? So we don't play matchmaker and we don't help broker any relationships between districts and providers. We are a technical assistance partner, so we'll help share knowledge and coaching for both districts and providers or doing them together. If we do get word of an outcomes-based contract to RFP, we will share it and send it out, but we don't do any brokering of relationships. In the future, we're working towards micro-credentialing and we're working towards a badging, but that's not something available at this moment in time. So with mutual accountability, thank you all for those questions. It is a common misconception about OBCs that, well, if the district just doesn't use the program or if the schools just don't have students attend tutoring, then um, we just don't get paid. And that's actually a really common misconception because it's written into the contract. What is the clear dosage? What is the clear attendance? What are the clear accountabilities that we need to have schools and districts do on behalf of a strong implementation? And if those aren't met, the district is on the hook then for paying out those student outcomes. And listen, no district wants to go in front of their board and say, we paid out on that contract, not because students met the outcomes, but because we didn't do what we said we were going to do. And so when we talked about that early findings of the 95% usage in Duval County versus the national average of the 5% problem, it's because of this, right? It's because this mutual accountability and the financial incentives assigned to it in a contract change behaviors for the better. And it really is a forcing mechanism for strong implementation from the beginning. I'm not going to read through these, but I just wanted to share some examples of what mutual accountability can look like. They're all personal to the district and to the provider, whatever the intervention is. So these are just some examples, but it's really about going back to your research as a provider and saying, this is what we know needs to happen in order for student learning outcomes to be met, and then writing that into the contract. And you'll see here in the bottom right, for any student who falls below an average of 75% of the recommended dosage, and that dosage would be clearly written out into the contract, the district may be required to pay both outcome payments. And so those are all things that you write into the contract. And if any Brene Brown fans here, clarity is kind. And so it's all about making the contract as clear as possible. All right, some next steps. What's available for you for deeper learning and coaching? So if I haven't lost you yet, we'd love to see you and have you join us for some deeper learning and coaching on how you can infuse OBC principles through your organization. So we do offer, we're currently in the middle of a coaching cohort, and then we're doing another provider coaching cohort in January. I'll share that in just a minute. And so what's included is 2 virtual learning sessions that will deepen your OBC understanding of OBC and best practices. And then we have one-on-one, 3 one-on-one coaching sessions with an OBC coach, and then access to exclusive resources available to advising participants. And so some example topics that are covered during OBC provider coaching, anything from developing your own rate card, designing your outcome and metric pairings, um, how to support clear data structures and contract templates. And we're even supporting some with revenue recognition policies, OBC principles and product road mapping, etc. Um, Lastly, as I named, we start January 12th. It's 6 weeks. The investment is $5,500, and you can bring up to 5 people in your organization. So recommend bringing people from implementation to sales to revenue teammates because it's very much a cross-functional thing. I'm going to leave this up here. You can scan this QR code if you want to learn more about it. The application deadline is December 12th, and it starts on January 12th. Again, just want to thank you, Jill, and the RFP SchoolWatch team for inviting me into your space and allowing me to share more about outcomes-based contracting and how they're really supporting so many K-12 providers with deep go-to-market advantage in this current moment and environment. So really appreciate you. And I know that the RFP SchoolWatch team is going to um, share some resources that are applicable to them. And if you do want to email me to learn anything more about OBCs or set up time to talk, you can see my email there as well as the RFP SchoolWatch team email. I am going to take some questions, but I'm going to go back to the QR code just in case you want to still scan that and learn more about it. All right.
I think there
Thank
was
you,
another
everyone.
question in there, Jillian
Oh, there's a
or
bunch.
Vanessa.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your such thoughtful questions. We do have about um, 10 minutes, and so happy to answer as many questions as we can. Was this recorded and can it be
Yes,
shared with us?
I
Jill,
answered that one.
Jill affirmed it is recorded. Thank you. So are there templates for behavior or staffing services? Where are examples of a district highlights? So this goes back to our the question of what lines of business have we seen OBCs in? And the high level answer is there are principles and theories around OBC that I think are applicable to every single line of business as it comes to education. However, here at the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting, we have done feasibility research in high dosage tutoring, ed tech, instructional interventions, so things that are directly student facing, as well as curriculum-based professional learning. So if your line of business, Vanessa, is outside of those three, I won't have any specific resources to those, but I do recommend going to our general templates and standards of excellence. And I think it would be pretty easy to derive those to form your line of business. Um, I do think, though, that there are times where there are some businesses where potentially or programs where contingent outcome payments maybe just don't work, right? Um, and so I'm naming that we've only done feasibility research in those 3 lines of business that I've shared.
Okay, there was another question about if it's applicable for accounting and finance vendors. So at this time,
It's
there's
it,
not, right?
we won't have the resources and I don't have the research around it. However, I definitely still recommend going onto our website and just seeing even if you don't make outcomes contingent for your accounting or finance vendors, like how can you still at least have clear mutual accountability in the contract? You know what I mean? And like how can you at least make your contracts with them more clear about what exactly they're doing, what exactly you're doing, um, and getting better implementation in that sense. So even if you can't do a full OBC just because it's not within one of those lines of business, I always believe that there's best practices and principles that can be infused in any line of business.
Do you see this as a trend spreading to, for example, other types of vendors that provide services to schools?
Yes, absolutely. So I can tell you we're always exploring new lines of business to do research in. Some things that have come up and people have asked us a lot about are college and career readiness solutions, attendance solutions, um, a lot of social emotional learning type of solutions. People have put on our radar just like more general like AI tools, right? Um, Curriculum has actually been an interesting one. So we started in 2022. We're really proud of where we're at so far, but we're just beginning, and there's definitely going to be more lines of business that we expand into from a research standpoint.
Yeah, it sounds like this is really important for people to understand, even if they're not in those specific areas, just because it's trending, things will start to trend in that direction.
Yes, absolutely. A clear example of that in California, even though this is not a line of business that we've done research in, we're seeing more and more districts use their ELOP funding in California for their after school programs for OBC, right? And holding their after school and summer camp providers um, under an OBC partnership, right? So it's very clear what everyone's trying to get out of it. And so even though that's not a line of business that we've done research in, it's people are doing it and it's working. So, just because we're a small but mighty team, that doesn't mean it's not going to keep growing in other areas.
Mm. There was a question if people are able to get a copy of the slide deck.
I will check. I think the best is probably the recording. And then if there's any specific information that you're looking to get, please just feel free to email me and always happy to pass along.
And so I put the link in here to the technical assistance coaching for ed tech providers. Is that the same thing as this, or is that
Yeah,
something else? Oh, that's
yeah,
it. Okay, because
that's
someone asked me to
perfect.
put it in the chat.
Thank
And there is
you.
one more question.
Perfect. Um, Clive has a question about student creativity tools. So there's plenty of independent research. Okay, so the question is about how to see if an OBC could work in a student creativity tool. It's been like a controlled environment research. So, a lot of providers will get started with OBCs using the research from, their large scale RCTs, right? But what's so beautiful about OBCs is that not only do a strong OBC will start with some level of evidence so they can create a good outcome, but it'll also generate a lot of great evidence throughout the year for you. So we're seeing more and more providers actually use OBCs as a way to be an evidence generator because you're having strong implementation. It's a very good environment. You're tracking data in many ways aligned to students. It's being used appropriately. And then also, you have wonderful data. So, for example, if you're the provider who is supporting that implementation, let's say in Duval County, Florida, you can now go to all of the other districts right around it and say, here's how we specifically were able to support the students in the county next door. And we believe we can do the same for you guys, right? Just it makes the sales narrative so much stronger. And that's why I truly believe in it as a go-to-market strategy.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jillian. This has been very informative, and I think people got a lot of good information from your presentation. And I wanted to just put in the chat here, if anybody is on this call, I know we have many of our customers and some of our people who are in on our email list. If you are not a customer and you're interested, please have a look on this link. You can get a sample bid report for the contracting opportunities, the bid alerts that we send out. So you can get a sample report if you're not a customer already. I know many people on this call are customers already. And we appreciate you. Thank you so much, Jillian. This was great. And again, if anybody has any questions, there was a slide there with the email addresses, I believe. Yes. So you can reach out. I know somebody asked me to put it so we have some links in the chat there if you want to check those out or email us. Any last final questions before we end the webinar? We had some good participation today. Thank you, everybody. We hope that this only leads to more success for all of you vendors that joined us here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.